and the founder of this amazing program, Be Nice. We started it 10 years ago, 11 years ago in 2010. And it was following the death by suicide of a young man who was a college student at Rutgers University. And he took his life following an incident that caused him to feel that life was not worth living. And he did struggle with mental illness during high school years too. But as we know that along with any mental illness, you can also become depressed with the illness called depression. And we know that 9 out of 10 times when someone dies by suicide, they have the illness called depression. Mental health disorders, 50% of mental health disorders come on by the age of 14 years old and 75% by the age of 24. And so with statistics like that, it's important that parents come to things like this to learn more. And specifically with my good friend, Eric, he is going to be talking about resiliency. And he himself has a story, but I think most of all, he's just a champion in what we're doing. And I think besides the staff of the MHF, Eric is our biggest advocate, and we're really fortunate to have him in the state of Michigan. We're very fortunate to have him on our team of ambassadors. So he also partners with us to go to schools when they want an assembly, which is great. But on the other hand, you need more than just assemblies. So it is with that I'm going to introduce one of my best friends, and he's like a brother to me, Eric Hipple, and he is a mental health advocate, a survivor of suicide. And what used to intimidate me was that he was a former Detroit Lion football player, but now I'm not intimidated because
nobody's intimidated at the Lions anymore. So
they're human beings just like all of us. And
yeah.
So I'm really excited that he is here today. So take it away. And Isabella Buck is on our call. She's the actual program coordinator for schools. So for any of you that might have kids that are in Be Nice, or if you are one of the movers and the shakers of Be Nice, which hopefully Royal Oak Middle School will be a mover and a shaker also, then you will be hearing from Isabella. So anyway, welcome and go for it, Eric.
Well, thank you, sister.
You're welcome, brother.
Hey, yeah, oh, big brother, that's right. So hey, first of all, just let me say this for a couple of minutes. I've been involved in mental health for, I want to say 20 years. I worked for the University of Michigan Depression Center for 10 years. Started working, trying to help develop programs and how to reach, hard to reach populations, stigmatized populations, and worked with military for over the course of 11 years. And so my main interest, though, has always been at schools and students. And at that level, because that's when I lost my son. He was 15 years old when I lost him to suicide. And so that's where my heart kind of lies. What I'm going to go to tonight is I'm not going to go through the action plan. Christy and her team do a great job at that, but notice, invite, challenge, and empower. So Be Nice. Notice, invite, challenge, and empower. I love the action plan. When I first started doing stuff with Christy before Be Nice was around, when this came through, it just made so much sense because it's something very simple to say, but also has so much deep meaning behind it. I joke about this, but I wear my shirt, Be Nice shirt when I travel, because ultimately somebody on the plane sitting next to you will say, "Oh, Be Nice, that's kind of cool. What does that mean?" And well, besides saying, be nice and let's be cordial and stuff to each other, it also, I can start talking about notice, invite, challenge, and empower, about mental health. Notice when something's right and if something's not doing well with somebody, then you notice that as well, and invite yourself, and also empowering yourself to speak out, to reach out, and also to advocate for yourself. And so, and it never fails when I get into that part of it, the person I'm sitting next to always has a story as well. And so it's a great way to open the door and talk to somebody. And they always have a story like, well, that happened in our family as well. Or, I'm struggling like this right now. Or, my son, we're having a problem with him right now. And we're really working to try to give him help. But they'll ask questions. And so it leads me to say, there's so much more information out there to be had. And the background behind all this, even though Be Nice is a simple statement to say, It's the background behind it and all the information that's come before it that we can actually pull it all together and say it's a simple and easy way that makes sense and it sticks. And so that's why I like it. And it's student driven, which I love. We have so much, our students are so creative and have got great minds. And if we listen to them, and some of the things that they say, what they need, instead of trying to say, here's how we do it, and this is, from the top down all the time, but just kind of meet them and listen to some of the things that they say, they come up with some great ideas, and they're our future. And so listening makes a big deal, as far as this part of this program goes. So anyway, what I'm going to do, like I said, is I'm going to go through a lot of information, a lot of background stuff just around what mental health, what I view mental health is, what I've learned along the way. Yes, it has to do with resilience. It has to do with understanding of emotions. It has to do tying into choices, decision making, into information about brain illnesses as well. So there's a lot of information, but I'm going to give it to you in a way that hopefully it flows. Because what I've noticed, and this is from doing peer-to-peer groups with high school students and stuff, that to make it flow and for a so one step leads to another step, and it's easier to learn that way, but it also makes more sense to maybe having an understanding of, how our brain works. Why do we get into, certain sticky situations to start with, the decision making and the things that might lead to some mental health issues along the way. So if you give me a second here, I'm going to load this up here for a second and see if I can't get it right. There it is. Okay. There we go. Okay. We got that. Everybody see that okay? And by the way, if you got any questions along the way, go ahead and speak out and we can handle something if you need to. So this is just my background. I'm not going to spend any time on that, of course. We've talked about that, but oh, of course. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. All right, sorry about that. So my backstory, it can be anybody's backstory, because we've all had successes. We've all gone through transitions. In fact, we've gone through one of the major transitions that this world's ever seen over this last year and a half to 2 years, going through a major change and trying to adjust to those changes. And our students have too. And, but, certain transitions, I've dealt with loss, most people have, grief, trauma, mental illness, and if you haven't been touched by it, well, but 1 in 5, approaching 1 in 4 people have been touched by mental illness or mental health issues, and so that means it's something that's very common and something we should really be aware of. So it's not us, and maybe it's our family member, or our friend, or somebody that we coworker. And so, of course, then the thing that I would like to get to, which is mental fitness, and that's just understanding the background and what mental health is and how can we maintain fitness along the way. See, and if we're going to do that, then we also have to understand, what mental health and well-being really is, right? And so mental health doesn't mean it's the absence of a disorder. That's not what really mental health is. It used to be part of the definition, but the true definition is it's a state of well-being on who we are. And that means comfortable with who we are. We feel good in our own skin. We're able to have confidence and self-esteem. We're able to reach our potential. We can cope normal stresses. We can have relationships, and we can be part of our community. And that definition means I can also have a mental illness, but still fit this definition because I'm managing it and I'm doing what I need to do. And so I'm taking care of myself. Or, I've got a great support system that helps me manage myself. So I can still be really mentally healthy and mentally fit, based on this definition. And I like that because it incorporates everybody. And so when I talk mental health, I'm not just talking about 1 in 4 people. I'm talking to everyone because we can always up our game a little bit. And so we start talking about mental health, and since it does incorporate everybody, we also have to understand, a team concept of what mental health is and why it's so important to include everybody. First of all, I'll use sports. I also use some military analogies, but, mission complexity, life is complicated. It's not just a simple pathway, it's complicated. And that means, to solve, life's problems and to get through community issues and community problems, it takes diversity. It takes, to solve these complex problems. So that means everybody counts. Every difference that people have, we need them, right? And so that means as a teamwork, working together. It also leaves no one behind, and that's been very popularized by the Navy SEALs mantra, which is no one gets left behind, because everybody's important, everybody counts. But also means that if you know that, then you won't be afraid or be at risk to help out in the community and to get involved, because if you know you're going to be included, that means that risk is not going to be and turn into a liability and get left behind and get ostracized and removed. And so no one left behind is very important. It's all about teamwork and working together in community. And and the psychological effect of exclusion, being ostracized, is painful. And not only is it painful, I mean, it even shows up in brain scans, the same place that physical pain shows up. That's how painful it is to be ostracized, to be ignored, to be removed from a group. And so knowing that means that if I feel that, then my tendency, if I can't belong to this group, my natural humanistic side is going to say, well, if I can't belong to them, then I want to get even with them. I don't want to belong to them. In fact, I don't like them at all, and I'll be angry with them, and I might even reject them back and be divisive and try to undermine them. And so the fact that we are inclusive and that everybody counts is really important if we're going to be a community. And of course, the change, from even the POW changes in the past of how we treat POWs. If somebody were to break and speak to the enemy, we would remove them and not talk to them. Well, like I said, that just removes that person. They want to be part of they become part of the enemy then, because if they can't be part of the group, they'll become part of the enemy. And so that has changed over the years to where today we don't do that. In fact, if somebody does break in one of these circumstances, we welcome them with open arms. Welcome them back. There might be consequences to their action, but we still welcome them back, and they're still part of the group, they're still part of the community. And that's a really important part of our mental health, to understand those concepts. So if we're going to understand mental health, there's several things that we need to understand to put it all together. And that's, kind of how the brain works. And I kind of simplify that and go through that. But the fact that we do have emotions and how they work, and there are things that can affect us, and there's coping tools when those things do affect us. How do we strategize? Resilience, and there's keys to our mental fitness, that we can utilize, and of course values. And those are the things I'm going to touch on. So how the brain works. First, we have to understand, how complex this wonderful thing is that's between our ears. It's everything that we are. It's a universe within itself. In fact, this 3.5 pound, problem-solving wonder that sits there has over 100 billion neurons. Some say it approaches 200 billion neurons, but the main thing is they form trillions and trillions of connections. And it's these connections that we form along the way, from the moment that we're first conceived or maybe born, that we start taking information in, and we start making these connections on how we're going to solve the problems of life. The things that we have, looking for shelter, food, the basics. But not only that, how do we interact socially? How do we solve these problems? How do we find happiness? How do we interact and be successful? And the thing about this wonderful brain of ours is it actually operates on just a set of B-cell batteries. That's how low power it is. And so it goes for low power efficiency. But that also means it does make mistakes along the way. There are things that's, so it's not all on or all off. And by that we mean it's not a 0 or a 1 like a computer has to be. So it does get variations in it. And that's great, because it makes us different. And that difference, actually adds to the whole. But it is amazing and complex, and a petabyte of storage that's approaching a supercomputer is what storage we have. And if you think about just walking into a room and looking around, how much we're actually doing and storing information for creating experiences, creating a knowledge base that we have just by that in itself. And the fact that not only does it operate just in as a whole, it also has, two parts, which is the conscious and the subconscious. Our thinking brain, our conscious brain that makes us aware, but there's so much that's done in our subconscious, because when we learn something, we actually practice it and put it over and over again. And that means it goes into our subconscious. And so a lot of the decisions that we make are actually done in our subconscious mind. Okay, but we're the ones that program it. We're the ones that give it the rules on how to operate. And then we let it work, and so and that's an important piece. I mean, we have these aha moments at times because our subconscious is constantly working. I don't care if you're asleep or awake, it's still working. And it might be solving problems while we're asleep, and I'll wake up in the morning and aha, because it's always working for us. But we are the ones that program it. And the thing about learning how we get to that programming and the things that we do program, it's based on experimentation. Learning is based on repetitive notion or actions. It's also on stuff that's novel, that intrigues us and that we're motivated to learn. And so the way that we, become experiential and brain plasticity means that we're malleable and shapeable all the way up, and quite frankly, until the point that we die. We're still can actually change and form new connections. And so this experimentation of pushing boundaries, it especially goes on in teenage years when the brain is actually trying to figure out who it is and its identity and where it fits into the world and its own self. And so this experimentation part means that we push boundaries, and we find something that works for us, then this amazing feedback loop says, well, that was good. That worked out really, really well. Hey, remember that. In fact, so maybe I'll do that again and again and again because it's been successful for us. And by doing that, that means, you know what? I start laying down a track. It starts becoming part of my subconscious. It starts becoming part of my operating manual, right? And so we have formed a memory that actually works for us by pushing and decision making. Well, we also learn when we make a mistake. And so, I won't do that again. And that means, that feedback loop is really important to have. So we get that feedback. The thing is, we need to have consequences in our life because otherwise we wouldn't have that feedback loop that says that was a mistake, don't do that again. And so it's really important that we realize that as we're dealing with a teenage mind and a teenage brain, that it does need consequences. It does need some rules. It doesn't always need the best buddy. Sometimes it needs a parent to be involved, to get involved in that. And so, and understanding that, right? And so that the good and the bad, and hopefully we learn a lot of good things and good decisions. And if we do, then they become practice because we practice them. And like I said, over and over and over again, then they become habit. And that's what we really want to form, right? We want an operating, brain that does good things and forms good habits and operates so we can get along with society and not stressing and frustrated and susceptible to some of the brain stresses and issues that come along with it. The thing is, when we learn these things, how we view the world is they're our core belief system. And so as we're learning and bringing this information in and kind of getting the feedback to it, is this good or bad? We're forming the central ideas on who we are, our identity, and what works and doesn't work, and we're not born with these things. We're actually learned them along the way. And so there's things that can really help us in positive ways. So we got positive feedback. Hey, great job. Hey, you almost got it. That's right. I'm there for supporting you. I'm there with you. Hey, I believe in you. And those things are really positive. And so it means that we respond positively to them. But there's also harmful core beliefs that we have. Like, the world is a terrible place. I'm afraid to go down the street. I don't think I can do it. I don't believe in myself. And these negative things that we have are also part of that feedback loop, but it's also become our belief system. And so that's the lens that we look through. So that belief system becomes the lens that we look through when we look at the outside world and how we interpret everything. And I think it's one of the things that's really difficult with social media is because I'm not face to face, I'm not interacting, I can't see the emotions on how I hurt or don't hurt somebody. I'm just putting information out there, right? That's really not tied to anything. And I can really hurt people by that. Because the person on the other end, I don't know what kind of mindset they're in, and they're receiving this information I throw them in. So we can create some really negative feedback. And a person who sees things negatively might respond negatively to social media. and maybe become the trolls where they're firing things off that are really hurtful, because maybe their outlook, their lens to the world isn't a positive one. So we need to really be aware of these things. Okay. The good thing is about our belief system is it can be changed. As I said, we're not born with them. We learn them along the way, and that means we can change them. We can learn a different way, but it takes a conscious mind to be able to do that, and some practice and some thought and some learning along the way to do that as well. And so the lens that we look through, of course, are our perceptions. And so it affects our thoughts, our emotions and our behaviors. So thoughts, feelings, and actions, they are all connected. So a negative thought might turn into a behavior. I might get a negative thought because of a negative emotion that might pop up because of a circumstance that happens. And so managing our thoughts helps control our behaviors and also can change our feelings. And so that's how we can change our core belief system as well. When we're talking about feelings and we're talking about our emotions, the one thing about emotions is the common denominator for human beings. I don't care who you are, where you come from. I don't care the, race, creed, religion, it doesn't matter. We all have these core emotions. If you say you're sad, I understand sadness because I get sad. And so I can immediately understand the feeling that you have. And it's the same with joy, fear, disgust, anger. They're all there. And so we have empathy with each other because we have them ourselves, and so we can recognize them in someone else. And so we have a common bond that brings us all together. The thing is, understanding these emotions, because they also drive bodily sensations, they drive our thoughts, they can drive, our actions. And so understanding these emotions and be able to talk about them and understand them means that we can talk on a common denominator basis and have these discussions. They're really important to understand. So we start talking about emotional awareness. It's the ability to recognize and describe one's own emotions. It's the skill, it's the most fundamental to emotional intelligence. So what do I do with these emotions? And to regulate emotions, you need to understand them and be aware of them. It also, part of emotional awareness is there's things we can do with these emotions. One is we can avoid them, right? And if I avoid emotions, that means, I don't have the ability to extract the information from them. I don't have the ability to regulate them because I don't even know what they are because I'm avoiding them. And it takes a lot of energy. Think about this ball with trying to push a ball underneath the water. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And the ball keeps trying to pop up. And so that takes a lot of energy, to avoid emotions. And sooner or later, they're going to pop up anyway. Oops. So, but we don't want to have excessive focus on our emotions either. That means I'm constantly trying to measure them, constantly trying to understand them, and I'm constantly talking about them, constantly aware of them, because that can be exhausting as well. If you think about a ball that you're holding up and that's your emotions and you're looking at it, right? As I look at this, right? Holding that ball up in the air for a long time, it gets heavy, right? And that's how it is if we're excessive about our emotions and always constantly talking about them. And quite frankly, people might just get tired of listening and not have as much meaning behind them because we're talking about them all the time. And they become overwhelming to do that, right? So where we really want to put them, we really want to have mindful focus on our emotions, understand where they come from, understand how they make us feel, the ability to be able to talk about them, and their origin and what they mean to us. And that way it means like they have them in front of me and it's kind of floating on the water. It doesn't take a lot of energy. It just means that I'm constantly I'm aware of them and I'm able to regulate them. And that regulation means I can regulate the things that emotions bring on, which is our actions and our thoughts as well. Okay. And so when we start talking again about, our thoughts and our emotions and behaviors, it means that, emotions come from bodily sensations. In other words, my heart starts beating really fast. Okay. It's because I have fear. Maybe, my blood starts rushing, to my face real quick and I get really flushed. Like, am I excited? Am I happy? So, I mean, these sensations and they affect us in a way. So And the emotion is just a way of understanding what bodily sensation that you're having. Your face gets really red and you get angry, right? So a sensation happens, your heart's beating fast, like I said. And so we have these things that also gives us action tendencies. It gives how do we act according to whatever that emotion is or the body sensation is? How does it make us act, and deal with it? And so body sensations are, to understand them means that we can actually, prevent some physical complaints along the way, because we have prevention. I recognize this, and so I will calm down and not get excited. It also means that I'm able to take care of these things, these physical things when they happen. So I understand. So maybe, I don't get stressed out because I'm able to manage it. And they're also tied to, emotions affect our bodies in certain ways. And I think you can tell the difference between, this depression and what it looks like when, it's kind of shut down and there's not a lot of energy or activity going on, as opposed to a person who's got happiness when everything's lit up and, the blood circulating, the energy's there, and we're excited and happy. So these sensations are tied to our emotions. And when I talked about action tendencies, what I was, for example, talking about when something, like a negative emotion happens to us, we have it urges us to act. Okay. And so angry, maybe I, urge to attack, or fear, to avoid or to run away, disgust, maybe to, reject, expel, get away from it. And so we have actions, by whatever these tendencies are, by what the emotions are hitting us with. And so when we start talking about certain emotions, and this example, like shame, my action tendency, I don't like to feel shame. And so maybe I hide from it. And so my action tendency is to grab, a bottle of alcohol and drink it. And that becomes an automatic reaction, because if I do it enough times, it becomes a habit. And that becomes my automatic action tendency. So in order to break that action tendency, we have to understand what the emotion is and be able to think about it. Okay, so now we're aware of it. And if I'm aware of it, that means then I can actually get another choice or another thought about how I respond to it. And so maybe my choice is, to explore other options. So instead of drinking, maybe I will calm down, maybe I'll meditate, maybe I'll get to the person who made me angry and discuss it and open it up. And so we need to be mindful of these action tendencies and how we respond to them. It's harder to kind of pin down our action tendencies on positive stuff, because quite frankly, when I'm having a positive experience, I'm open to the world. All possibilities become there. And so it's not just one action tendency. It might be the ability to look at all things, because now I'm open and it's positive and I'm open to all ideas. So this brings us to what emotion intelligence is. And it just refers to the ability to manage emotion encounters. In other words, and why is that important? Emotional intelligence is important because it affects, how we respond to others. So if I notice it myself, okay, I can understand my own emotions. And so how do I deal with it? How do I manage that myself? What are my coping skills that I have with it? If I can see it in other people, because I can see it myself, then I understand how to deal with someone else and how to talk to them in an emotional state they might be having. But it also helps me regulate, the emotion that I might be having. It also helps me, like I said, deal with other people and maybe negotiate and manage them as well. And maybe even spur somebody else on and motivate somebody else. So moving on to an area of, we talk about these things that we have and how wonderful they are, that we have them, but we also have to think about the things that can affect us. Okay. And these things can also happen unexpectedly. So we have injury, we have brain illnesses, stress, and trauma. And I'm going to just hit on some of these things real briefly. I'm not going to talk on that. I will talk on brain illnesses because, as I said, and Christy brought up, the ages, 15 to 24 is one of the major onsets for these brain illnesses. They are most of them are treatable. The thing is, it's early recognition that's really, really important. And so it's hard to recognize if you don't know what the symptoms are. It's hard to recognize it yourself, and it's really hard to recognize it in someone else. So the more that we notice, invite, challenge, and empower, the more that we notice, maybe the more that we're able to identify early. And as I said, they are treatable. And the symptoms that we have, not only do we have symptoms, we also have behaviors. And so symptoms of sleep issues, loss of pleasure, change of appetite, concentration, irritability or anger, pain, anxiety, sadness. And to me, one of the worst things that can happen to us as a symptom is become hopeless. Because unfortunately, hopelessness can lead to suicidal thoughts. And of course, that takes us to our behaviors, because if I feel these things and I feel lousy all the time, and I feel like there's no hope, then I want that to change. And so maybe my behaviors, maybe I'll more substance use or start drinking to try and change how I feel, or maybe risky behavior, without worrying about consequences because I don't care, or acting out, getting angry, or like I said, suicidal thoughts or behaviors, thinking about suicide, because that is the ultimate solution to a problem that can be solved in other ways. But if we can't find that other way, that because we're hopeless, that becomes what we think about. There's also trauma, and I want just to discuss trauma for a second, because there's a thing called ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. And the more ACEs that we have, the more adverse childhood experiences that we have when we're young, then the higher tendency it is for us to have problems when we get older. And so just understanding what trauma is, it is an experience. Okay, it can be physical or non-physical, but it's an experience. It is not the thing itself. It's the experience that the person has to the thing. So when you see something, you say, well, that didn't bother me. Why is he so traumatized by it? It's because the experience is different for him. And so it's not the thing, it's the experience. And so we can't really snub our nose at anyone that's having a traumatic experience, because we don't know what's going on or their background or what's in their history. And so we have to take them at face value and listen to them. Okay. We can take trauma and actually turn it into triumph, because if we've gotten through trauma before, we've gotten through something, maybe there's something to learn from it. So the experience, that we gain from it, it might give us better tools, and so once I've gone through one, adverse deal, I can learn a skill through it. And so how have I grown since the trauma has happened to me? What am I today, the person I am today? One thing that doesn't seem like it's a traumatic thing, but it really is. Remember, it's an experience. It's when we go through transitions that are unwanted and unwilling. And like I said, COVID has put us through tremendous transitions. There's been many people lose their jobs. There's been when you can't go to class, when you can't go to school. Just there's so much that's been wrapped up in these transitions, and trying to adapt and cope with them has been very, very difficult. But it is the experience that we're going through that we feel. And so we have to understand, that maybe going through this, and we look for the new life to be, and maybe have to let the old life go and work through it. And transitions can bring loss, grief, and loss of identity, support loss. So in times we have to take it on then and do something positive about it. And that's when we say, I'm going to make this a transformation. And so maybe I reinvent who I am, and maybe I find a way to heal through it, build a new support network, have hope, and maybe it gives me purpose. So that transformation is what we do. A transition may happen to us, but transform is what we do. And talking about stress, it's a physiological response, and it can affect our body it can affect our body, our emotions, our behavior. It affects everything about us in different ways. And so stress can be, it can be a good thing. We can have positive stress where I get a thrill because I, entice my fear factor. I get scared, but I know it's not real, or it's, I'm really safe. But it's fun to have that fear factor because you stimulate the emotion, and it's like, whoa, but I know it's okay. And so maybe it's a fun way to do it, or maybe I pump myself up before an event, and so I have a better performance by it. So that's positive stress. But negative stress, being hypervigilant for a long period of time, or I burn out and I'm having trouble sleeping, which is so important. Maybe hunger and pain issues can bring on stress as well. And so it's that negative long-term stress that can affect us. So there is one thing we can do to help with stress prevention, and that's trying to make sure things are predictable. That means that we use calendars, we use schedules, to try and make things predictable. The fact that we have some controllability over our lives, and so we do get to make choices. But maybe something that's not predictable can be controllable because we might practice, like a fire drill, or something that might happen at school, but we've practiced it, so when it does happen, we know what to do about it. And if we have relationships, that keeps us strong and support, and feeling in a trusted situation, or trust those that are around, and of course purpose and meaning. Having these things in your life can help with stress prevention. It helps manage it. Resilience, the ability to bounce back when you get knocked down, the ability to be able to overcome when you know something's coming, to be ready for it, because you know what to do, surviving trauma and tragedy, but not only just to survive, it's also to thrive. And learned resilience is when we've gone through something before. If we had adversity before and we've overcome it, well, we've learned adversity, and so the next time it maybe might not be so hard, might be easier. But in the meantime, having a resilience plan can be very helpful. Knowing who your support system is ahead of time, these 4 things can really help you. So ahead of time, knowing who your support system is. Who are they? Somebody you trust, a friend, somebody that can help you cope on things you can rely upon. Your coping strategies, breathing, exercise, meditation, mindfulness. Hope building, we're not just being able to cope right there with that strategy is, but also to be able to pull you through. So I know I have hope, so it will pull me through. And so, little mantras, even, every cloud has a silver lining, so I'll get through this. And then of course, ultimately problem solving, working towards solutions, because that's really how we work through the adversity and solve the problem on the other end. So having a resilience plan. And of course, then this leads to mental fitness. And I'll use this and wrap up with this, but mental fitness are the things that we do to improve our mental health. And as I said, it's the tools that we have to up our game a little bit, but also to keep us, in tune with our mental health. This has been, for me, the number one guiding factor of what these keys are to leading to mental fitness, because it's fundamentally the baseline for what mental health is. And so I'll just say it this way, okay? Recognizing our choices. Now, I didn't say make good choices or bad choices. I don't, that's up to you. I'm just saying recognize them. Because when you make a choice, you have to be able to recognize the consequence with it. So you recognize you're part of that choice. You're the one that made the choice. Because when we do that, and I make good choices, I recognize the consequences, the good things that go along with that. And so my self-esteem goes up. Well, if I make bad choices, if I'm recognizing it, my self-esteem still goes up, because when I make a bad choice and I recognize the consequence that goes with it, I will learn from it. And that helps my self-esteem. It is when I don't recognize the choices that we have problems. Because if I don't recognize I'm part of my life, what happens is something good might happen for me, but I'll think I'm just lucky. Wow, I was lucky. I don't even recognize the fact that, that I'm making choice, or, something good happens for you. Man, was I in the right place, right time? Something bad happens for me, or something negative happens for me. I might recognize the consequence, but if I don't recognize that I was involved in it, it was part of my choice, and I made a bad choice, then I won't learn from it. And so my self-esteem will never grow. And it's impossible to have great mental health with poor self-esteem. And so as I recognize more and more of the fact that I'm involved in my life and these choices that I'm making, good or bad, my self-esteem will continue to grow. And when that happens, something magical happens is I begin to like who I am and want to protect who I am. And that means I will put together a really good solid boundary around me, because I want to protect me. I like me. And so I can say no to people. And if I get myself into a bind, a bad situation, I will back out of it and say no to that, because I like me and I want good things for me. And ultimately, my boundary that might start off small, with just a couple of friends or whoever I have in it, will ultimately grow, because the stronger my self-esteem goes, then the bigger my boundary gets, because I want to live in a good community. I want to be at a good school. And so I'll make sure that the things that are going on at school, I'm part of, and that, I might stop something from happening, because that's not good for the school. And ultimately, it's not good for me. And so same thing with the community. I want to live in a good community. And so I'll be a positive influence on it. And so my boundary will grow to even include the community. But that means that if I got a good healthy boundary, I can be vulnerable to those I allow inside. That means the friends I choose, the family members I choose, the people I choose to be inside that boundary that I can communicate with, I can be open and honest and vulnerable, and I can actually solve some problems. I can talk about the emotions that I have and share with them, so I can actually get to the basis and not be avoidance, but I can be in direct communication with them. And that means my communication will change, and I will be more of a positive influence. And my communication will be able to solve some of these problems and be able to maintain health, be able to, reach out to someone else and help them if they need it, but also, speak out for myself. And of course, the biggest thing about this is it takes a commitment to live this way. You know, even learning something new takes more than 60 days before it becomes a habit. So that means I can't just try this for a day or two. I actually have to think about these things and the choices that I'm making for a period of at least 2 months or longer, even for it to start to stick. And so let's make a commitment to teach this to others, but also make them aware of their own choices and their own self-worth and who they are, and lend a helping hand when needed, but also do it for ourselves as well. And with that, then we make the commitment to do that and to be a better neighbor, a better family member, a better neighbor, and a better community member. And so that kind of sums up the mental fitness. And for me, the Be Nice program is the entryway into all of this, which says, be nice, notice, invite, challenge, and empower yourself. And with that, I would like to say, thanks for being here tonight, and for being on. I think I'm on track, on time. Yeah. And so I just want to thank you very much, and for taking the time and for listening. If anybody's got any questions, be happy to answer them, or